I straightened my tie, set my glass down on the nearest table, and walked out of my own father's birthday party without saying a word to anyone. Nobody stopped me. Nobody even noticed. They were all too busy celebrating. But before I tell you how that night ended, and trust me, it ended in a way nobody in that room saw coming, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city in the comments. I read every single one. My name is not important. What matters is this. I am 31 years old. I work in commercial real estate financing. And for the better part of a decade, I have been the invisible son. Not the oldest, not the favorite, not the one my parents bragged about at church or brought up at Thanksgiving dinners. I was the one who showed up, did the work, kept his head down, and asked for nothing. My brother Garrett is 5 years older than me. Garrett has always been the son that my family orbited. He played college football on a partial scholarship, married a woman named Renata, who my mother treats like a second daughter, and settled in the same town as my parents, 12 minutes from their front door. He barbecues with my father every Sunday. He calls my mother every morning. He is, by every measure my family uses, the good son. I moved 2 states away at 23. I took a job nobody in my family understood, in a city where I knew nobody, and I built something quietly and alone. I did not ask for help. I did not receive any. When I struggled in my first year, eating rice and beans, sleeping on a mattress on the floor of a studio apartment, I did not call home. I already knew what I would hear. Garrett would never have done this. Garrett stayed close. Why did you have to go so far? So I stopped calling except on holidays. And on holidays, I smiled and nodded and drove back to my city and returned to the life I was building in silence. By the time I was 29, that life looked like this. A salary that would have made my father's jaw drop. A savings account I had never touched. And a black Audi RS5 that I bought with cash on a Tuesday morning because I had worked for 3 years without taking a vacation. And I wanted one thing, one single physical object that proved to me the years of sacrifice had meant something. I loved that car in the way that only people who have gone without understand. It was not vanity. It was evidence. It was the one thing I owned that said, without any words, you did it. I want you to remember that detail. The car matters. My father turned 60 this past spring. My mother called me 6 weeks before the date and told me the party was being held at a private event room in a hotel downtown. Their downtown, not mine, and that the whole family would be there. Extended family. Church friends, neighbors, around 80 people. She said, "It would really mean a lot to your father if you came." She did not say it would mean a lot to her. She specified my father. I noted that, filed it away, and said I would be there. I drove up the Friday before, checked into a hotel because staying in the family home has not been something I have been able to do comfortably since I was about 25, and spent Saturday morning getting the car detailed and buying my father a watch I had researched for 2 months. It was not an extravagant watch. It was a clean, classic dress watch from a brand he had mentioned once 4 years earlier in passing. I do not think he remembered saying it. I had written it down. That is the kind of son I am. I listen. I remember. I show up. I just do it quietly. The party started at 6. I arrived at 5:55. The room was already half full. Round tables with white linens, a bar in the corner, a photo display near the entrance, with pictures of my father across 6 decades. I found my name at a table near the back, not near the head table, where Garrett and Renata were seated with my parents, but near the back, next to a second cousin I had met twice and an elderly neighbor who spent most of the evening asking me if I was the one who lived in Atlanta. I do not live in Atlanta. I smiled. I ordered a drink. I watched my father work the room with the ease of a man who has always known exactly where he belongs. Around 7:30, after dinner had been cleared and the speeches had begun, I felt something settle in my chest that I had not expected. Watching my father laugh at something Garrett said from the microphone. Watching my mother reach over and squeeze Garrett's arm while Renata leaned into his shoulder. I felt something I had spent a long time pretending I did not feel. I felt like a guest at my own family, not a son, not a member of anything, a visitor who had been allowed in out of courtesy. I did not let it show. I have had years of practice. Garrett's speech was about football metaphors and the importance of never leaving your team. He said the word legacy 4 times. The room laughed at all the right moments. My mother was crying before he was halfway through. Then my father stood up. He spoke for about 10 minutes. He talked about his own father, about building a career from nothing, about the pride he felt in his family. He mentioned Garrett by name 7 times. He mentioned Renata twice. He mentioned my mother, his church, his friends, his neighbors. He did not mention me, not once. I counted. I was sitting 20 feet away, and he looked in my direction exactly once. Briefly, the way you glance at a piece of furniture that happens to be in your sightline. Then, his eyes moved on. I took a long, slow sip of my drink, and I looked down at the tablecloth, and I decided right then and there that I was going to leave as soon as it was polite to do so. I did not decide anything dramatic. I did not plan a scene. I am not that kind of person. I was simply going to say goodbye, drive back to my hotel, and on Sunday I was going to drive home to my city, and I was going to accept, finally and completely, that this family was not something I could keep reaching toward. That was my plan. And then, at approximately 8:15, Garrett tapped the microphone again. "I want to do one more thing," he said, and the room quieted. He was smiling the way he always smiles, wide, confident, completely at ease in his own skin. "I want to do something special for Mom and Dad. Well, for all of us, really." He reached under the head table and produced a manila envelope. He held it up. "As most of you know," he said, "Renata and I have been looking to move out of our rental for a while now, and as some of you know, my brother," and here he finally acknowledged my existence, gesturing toward my table, and 80 heads turned to look at me. "My brother has been doing very well for himself down in the city. We're proud of him." The room made a warm sound. A few people nodded at me. I did not move. So Garrett continued, after a family conversation, and I want you to notice those words, a family conversation, because I had been part of no such conversation. "We've decided that the right move, the move that keeps this family strong, is for my brother to sign over his car to Renata and me as a wedding gift. Well, a belated one." He laughed. The room laughed. "And," he said, holding up the envelope, "I've actually had the transfer paperwork drawn up already. So all we need is a signature." He looked at me. The room looked at me. My father looked at me for the first time all evening. My mother was already nodding, slowly, with the expression she wears when she has decided something is settled. The second cousin next to me whispered, "Oh, how nice." I want to pause here and make sure you understand what had just happened, because I have told this story to 3 people since that night, and all 3 of them asked the same question. Why would they think they could do that? The answer is that they had always been able to do it. Every time I had something they wanted, my time, my presence, my willingness to show up and be invisible, they had simply announced that it belonged to them, and I had let it go. I had been trained over 31 years to hand things over. They had every reason to believe this time would be the same. They were wrong. I picked up my napkin, placed it on the table, pushed back my chair, and stood up. The room was still watching me. I could feel 80 pairs of eyes. I walked to the head table. I took the manila envelope from Garrett's hand. I want to be honest about this moment. There was a part of me that felt the old pull, the familiar gravity of wanting to keep the peace, to not be the one who ruined the party, to find some way to smile and say we'll figure this out later. That part of me has been there my whole life. I recognized it. I let it be there. And then I opened the envelope and looked at the paperwork inside. It was real. It was a vehicle title transfer form, filled out in my name, transferring ownership of a 2022 Audi RS5 to Garrett and Renata. The only thing missing was my signature. I looked at Garrett. He was still smiling. He had the expression of a man who has never once had to wonder whether things will go his way. I said, quietly enough that only the head table could hear, "When did we have this family conversation?" He said, "Come on, don't make this a thing." My mother reached across and put her hand on my arm. "It's just a car," she said. "You can get another one. Garrett and Renata need something reliable." I looked at my father. He said nothing. He picked up his drink. I put the paperwork back in the envelope. I folded the envelope in half. I put it in the inside pocket of my jacket. Then I said, still quietly, "I'll hold on to this." Garrett's smile shifted. "What does that mean?" "It means I'll hold on to it," I said. "Enjoy the rest of the party." I shook my father's hand. It was a reflex. I do not entirely know why I did it. He shook mine back, confused. I nodded at my mother. I walked back to my table, collected my phone and my keys, said goodnight to the second cousin and the neighbor from Atlanta, and I walked out. The room was very quiet as I left. I heard Garrett say, behind me, "He'll come around." I got in my car. I sat there for a moment in the parking garage under the fluorescent lights with the engine off. I was not upset in the way I expected to be. I was not shaking. I was not angry, exactly. I was something quieter and more permanent than angry. I was done. I took out my phone and I made a call. The person I called was a man named Douglas. Douglas is an attorney. More specifically, Douglas is the attorney who, 14 months earlier, helped me establish an LLC, structure my personal assets, and, this is the part that matters, transfer ownership of my car into that LLC for liability protection purposes. The car had not been in my personal name for over a year. The transfer paperwork Garrett had drawn up was made out to a person who had not legally owned that vehicle since the previous February. I told Douglas what had happened. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "So they tried to transfer title on an asset they had no legal claim to, using paperwork that names you as owner when you are not the title holder of record?" I said yes. He said, "Do you want me to send them a letter?" I said yes. I went back to my hotel. I ordered room service. I slept better than I had in months. The letter arrived via email on Monday morning. I know this because my mother called me at 9:47 Monday morning, and the first thing she said was not hello. She said, "What is this?" I said, "Good morning." She said, "Douglas, whoever this is saying the car doesn't even belong to you?" "That's not true. We know you own that car." I explained, as calmly as I could, the concept of an LLC, asset protection, and title holder of record. I used simple language. I was patient. There was a long silence. Then she said, "You did this on purpose." I said, "I did it 14 months ago for routine financial planning. I had no idea it would ever be relevant to anything involving this family." Another silence. She said, "Your brother and Renata are very hurt." I thought about that for a moment. My brother and Renata, who had drawn up a title transfer for an asset they did not own, announced a family decision I had no part in and presented it to 80 guests as a done deal. They were hurt. I said, "I understand." She said, "Is that all you have to say?" I said, "I also want to say that I counted at the party. Dad mentioned Garrett 7 times in his speech. He didn't mention me once. I was sitting 20 feet away." She did not respond to that. I said, "I drove 4 hours to be there. I bought him a watch I spent 2 months researching. I sat at the back table next to people I've met twice, and I smiled all night. And the only time anyone acknowledged I existed was when they needed something from me." Still nothing. I said, "I think I need some time before we talk again." She said, "So that's how it is?" I said, "That's how it is." I ended the call. I set my phone face down on my desk. I sat there for a long time looking out the window at the street below. The city I had built a life in alone. The city nobody in my family had ever visited. And I felt something I had not expected to feel. Relief. Not the temporary kind you feel when an argument ends. Something deeper. The relief of a man who has finally put something down that he has been carrying for so long he forgot it had weight. My brother texted me that evening. The message was long. It talked about family loyalty and ingratitude, and how I had embarrassed everyone by walking out. It said that the car was just a symbol, that what he was really asking for was for me to show that I valued my family over material things. It said that my attitude had always been the problem. It said he hoped I would do some reflection. I read it once, then I deleted it. Not out of anger, not out of spite. I deleted it because I've spent 31 years reading variations of that message in 100 different forms. You are too independent, you are too far away, you don't prioritize us. You make everything about yourself. And I finally understood that there is no version of me that would satisfy what that message is actually asking for. What it is asking for is for me to be smaller, to need them, to remain in a position where what I have is always, at least a little bit, available to be claimed by people who did not earn it and would not appreciate it. I am not going to be that person anymore. I want to say something directly to anyone watching this who knows what I am talking about, because I think some of you do. I think some of you have a family table with a seat that was always slightly off to the side, slightly closer to the exit. I think some of you have driven long distances and bought thoughtful gifts and shown up with a smile and been looked through by the people you were hoping, one more time, might finally see you. I am not telling you to cut people off. I am not telling you to send a legal letter to your family. Every situation is its own thing. But I want to tell you what I know now, at 31, that I did not know at 23. You are allowed to build a life that belongs to you. You are allowed to protect what you have earned. You are allowed to say no in the middle of a room full of people and then walk out the door and get in your car and feel the city open up in front of you as you drive home. The watch I bought my father is still in my jacket pocket. I did not leave it at the party. I do not know yet what I will do with it. Some days I think I will mail it anyway because I bought it for him and not for a transaction. Other days I think I will keep it because it is a beautiful watch and I picked it out carefully and maybe it belongs to someone who will actually appreciate it. I have not decided. What I have decided is this. I will not be waiting by the phone. I will not be rechecking my messages for an apology that will probably never come in the form I need it to. I will go to work on Monday and I will drive my car, my LLC's car, technically, which makes me smile every time I think about it, and I will keep building the life I built alone, in a city nobody visited, on terms that belong entirely to me. My father turned 60 surrounded by the people who love him. I hope he had a wonderful night. I made sure to leave before it was over. If you're still here, I want to hear from you. Drop where you're watching from in the comments. And if something I said today landed for you, if you've ever been the one at the back table, smiling through something that didn't feel okay, hit like and subscribe to Revenge and Truth. There are more stories coming, and they are all true.